the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on X, and also on TikTok, folks. Please do send in your greetings. Please do send in your comments and your questions. And we've got an exciting show for you tonight. At 7:30, we've got friend of the show, Ash, Preston Journalist. He's going to be coming on. We're going to be talking about the Labour leadership crisis. We're going to be talking about Mike Graham being chucked off of Talk TV. We're going to be talking about other things as well, which are affecting our nation. And prior to then, we're going to be talking about our street stall, which we had on Saturday, and also a fantastic piece of detective work, which A Force for Good has done. And folks, we have caught the so-called stand up to racism people in a ridiculous and indeed a dangerous lie. And we're looking forward to exposing that. And it involves Police Scotland, and it involves a Freedom of Information request, which we made after we read a story in the National that struck us as just too far-fetched to be true. All of that's coming up, all of that and more. So folks, tell us where you're watching from and send in your comments. And please, if you're watching on X, give us a repost. Give us a quote repost as well, which will enable us to repost you. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a like. And if you're not already, please subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. And if you're watching on Facebook, give us a like, folks, and please give us a share, because it helps the message to get out there to literally the wider world. Paul says, greetings from the Garden of England. Catherine says she's putting the world to rights in Dornoch. Well, that's a nice place up there. And Freddie says, evening all from Stoke-on-Trent. Now, folk joining on TikTok as well, tell us what you think about our great nation. If you're watching on TikTok, we are very much for the United Kingdom. We are a pro-UK organisation. We've been on TikTok for a while. Please do give us a follow if keeping the British end up is your bag on Twitter. Now, and on TikTok. Now, let me just check up on something. Can everybody hear me clearly? If you can hear me clearly, please do tell me. Catherine says she's also got family there. Now, on Saturday, we were out in the great British city of Glasgow. We like to get out once a month, thereabouts. And we had another of our street stalls and went extremely well. We love to meet the great British public. They love to see us flying the flags. And we've got a picture. It was Remembrance Saturday, and we had a Lest We Forget flag up there. And we also had our AFFG flag, which is the one in the background. And I just snapped that picture when the flag appeared to get intertwined with the other flagpole and looks quite good. But people see these flags from a long distance away. The one there on the left-hand side, that's like 7 meters high. The other one's 6 meters high. So these are taking up all of the street there in Glasgow, and people see them from a long way away. Okay. There's part of our table team, just as we began. We love the great British city of Glasgow, aforceforgood.uk. We're all ready to start the day and greet the public. Okay. And there's two legends, one of which includes myself and our other great member of the table team there. Okay. And there's I like that one, lest we forget, caught at the perfect dynamic angle of shot. Excellent. Okay. And we were very busy, as you can see. That was what like the table was like, really for most of the day, I'm glad to say. Okay. Now, people will say, "Oh, do you get any trouble or something like that?" And we don't at all. But we do get people, of course, who don't necessarily agree with us, and we have just intellectual discussions, and that's a good thing. I have to say, though, we've never been convinced by somebody making a point that we may indeed be in error. But nevertheless, it's good to meet those who might disagree with us. And we had a slightly unusual conversation with a middle-aged lady who came up in a little bit of a state, and she said, in a rather somewhat accusing manner, she said, Are you aware that when people see your flags, they get scared?" And I was like, "Excuse me? I'm not aware of that." And she goes, "Some people do get scared when they see those flags." I'm like, "Well, I don't know what there is to be scared of, because one of them is the flag of the country and the other is simply our organization's brand. We're certainly not intending to scare anybody. We've never had anybody coming up to tell us that they're scared of our flags." I said, what do you mean by that?" And she starts going off about how asylum seekers and refugees feel threatened when they see the flags of the country. And I said to her, "Well, I'm not sure that's correct. I doubt that they really are scared by seeing the flags of the country. And it is, if they're asylum seekers and refugees, it is the flag of the country to which they have sought refuge. So why would they be scared of the country's flag if they are literally seeking refuge in that country? There's no reason for them to look on the flag with fear. One would think that if they're seeking refuge here, they would very much look on the flag with favor, with gratefulness, one would have thought. And that didn't actually convince her. So she tried another tact, and she said, "Are you aware that these people are escaping great harm?" And I goes, "Well, that's very much a matter for political debate. Not everybody necessarily agrees with that. You've got to be very diplomatic when you're on the street, of course, because you don't want to create any kind of issues on the street." So she then starts being slightly accusatory, saying, "Well, what would you do? What would you do if you were going to be threatened with prison? Surely you'd want to flee somewhere too." And I said, well, I mean, if I'm being threatened with prison here in Scotland, I'm not going to flee to another country. It's probably an unfortunate fact for me that I'm going to be going to prison. And so that's not what she wanted to hear. She wanted to hear that I was going to try to run away somewhere. And so she started another tack, which was, well, what if they were going to kill you? What would you do then? And he goes, well, one would just have to stand and do one's best to defend oneself and to fight to protect whatever it was that they were trying to presumably take. And she goes, no. If you had to flee somewhere, where would you flee? If they're trying to kill you, where would you flee to? And I goes, well, I mean, if you're putting me on the spot, if I had to flee somewhere, I'd probably flee to Edinburgh. At which point she goes, oh, well, I've got to go. I've got to go. I'm very busy this morning. I'd love to stay and chat, but I've got to go. I've got to go. Goodbye. And I just looked at the other table team members, and we were just like, what? That's what we're up against. Anyway, that stood out. That was a conversation that stood out from the table on Saturday. But talking about flags and for example, the Raise the Colours campaign, which the lady was probably alluding to. This article here was published in the Telegraph on the 5th of November. Labour-led councils spend more than rivals taking down flags. Local authorities spent more than 60,000 this year so far removing Union flags and St George's crosses, and 34,000 of the spending was by Labour-run town halls. Data from Freedom of Information requests reveal that York Council spent the most, £16,378, on dealing with 5 places where flags had been raised. These are crazy numbers for just sending somebody up a flag. It's like sending somebody up a pair of ladders with a pair of snippers. I mean, I don't understand how those costs can mount up. William Yarwood, media campaign manager of the Taxpayers Alliance, said, quote, taxpayers will be astonished that councils are spending tens of thousands of pounds tearing down Union Jacks and St George's crosses. It's absurd that scarce resources are being wasted policing displays of patriotism. Absolutely. Absolutely. A spokesman for East Riding of Yorkshire Council said, quote, we are committed to removing any unsafe or unauthorised displays, paintings or graffiti that could distract or confuse drivers. Okay. That's your excuse. Well, talking about taking down flags, have I got a story for you coming up in a few minutes. Let's say hello. Let's say hello to some more people. Hi to Oksana, who says the sound's coming in fine. I think that was just the first few seconds that it didn't work. Hello to Derek. Oksana Reese says, was the woman English? She was, I think she might have been Scottish, but she was certainly British. Yes, she wasn't a foreigner, I should say. She was a sort of liberal Democrat type of person without wanting to be offensive to liberal Democrats. But you know what I mean when I say that, right? That sort of type. And of course, they are, as you say, Derek, most of these people are just economic migrants. And Stephen says the same thing. And that Migration Watch has proved through its study that most incomers are economic migrants. Catherine, if you were there, you would definitely have enjoyed it. You would have definitely enjoyed that conversation. Ridiculous. Paul says, Alistair, to what extent should we support the British Broadcasting Corporation? I like the idea of a British national broadcaster, and some people still see the BBC as a treasured national institution. Paul, I know what you mean. Many years ago, I wrote, when I say many years ago, but 20 years ago, I wrote an article defending the British Broadcasting Corporation because for me, growing up in the 1970s, it was part of the national psychology, really. It was the back when there was only like 3 channels, BBC, BBC Two, and ITV. That was back in the days when BBC One was for the normal people, BBC Two was for the clever people, and ITV was for the Scottish nationalists. And the world was perfectly ordered as a consequence of that. And then all that got blown apart when Channel 4 arrived on the scene. And that was the beginning of the end, basically, when Channel 4 arrived on the scene. And now, of course, there's more channels than you can shake a stick at. But I still have an attachment to the BBC, and I like the idea, as you do, of a state broadcaster. I think that's a good thing, and I'm not opposed to the concept of a state broadcaster. But I do realize, as the years have passed, that the BBC has fallen short in many ways, and this ridiculous situation that they got themselves into with the Trump statement. Trump, they I don't know how many people have seen it, but Trump says we're going to march down to Capitol Hill and we will fight. And what the BBC did was they spliced those 2 sentences together, when in fact those 2 sentences are separated by about an hour's worth of speech. And his fight thing is in reference to fighting to get the truth about the electronic counting machines. So they really did. They'd made a big mistake, and they're going to suffer for that. And I would like to see a British Broadcasting Corporation run like people by myself, run by people like Paul Hadlow, run by people like John Reith, the first ever Director General. If we had that sort of thing, then the state broadcaster would be absolutely great. And every night it would have people like us on describing how you stop the channel traffic and how you stop all these asylum seekers taking advantage, and how you stop knife crime and all that sort of stuff, if we had a real state broadcaster instead of basically an arm of the liberal state or even the deep state. So to answer your question, I have an attachment to the British Broadcasting Corporation, but it's at this present moment, it is its own worst enemy. But I'm not one of these people that goes against it, like shouts against it and stuff like that. I think that's just destructive. Unless you've got a better solution, it's just destructive. And anybody who's been to America and has seen the commercialization of television over there, you realize that there is value in having a state broadcaster. Anyway, we've got 10 minutes here for this point that I want to make about we have exposed and we have caught the so-called stand up to racism people in a ridiculous lie. Now, let me take you back to this article, which appeared in The National on the 9th of October this year. And it's related to the group who call themselves Stand Up to Racism, saying that they were out in Sight Hill in Edinburgh taking down flags. Now, the flags that were in Sighthill that they were taking down were saltires and lion rampants. Now, most people wouldn't want to see those taken down, would they? So, Stand Up to Racism say that they were taking them down and that they were approached by the very person who put the flags up. And this person threatened them, saying, "I'll slit your throats." Scott's anti-racism campaigners threatened while removing lamppost flags. Campaigners for Stand Up to Racism Edinburgh were attempting to remove saltires and lion rampant flags from flag posts in Sighthill on October the 5th when they were approached by an individual. And there's the article there. And I'll just read one or 2 points before we take it down. It says in the first column there, it says, a spokesman for the group said, quote, "On October the 5th, Stand Up to Racism supporters attempted to remove saltire and lion rampant flags on lampposts in Sighthill. If there was any doubt about the message these flags are intended to carry, it was dispelled by what happened next. An individual approached, threatening to slit our throats and stab us for interfering with my flags. This was right beside graffiti saying, 'Deport Muslims.' He then violently broke our equipment." Okay. So I'm looking at that and thinking, that's a serious accusation that they're making. Somebody was threatening basically to unalive them. It goes on, it says, a spokesperson for SUTR told the National that the police had been contacted during the incident. A spokesperson for SUTR, Stand Up to Racism, told the National that the police had been contacted during the incident. And this person goes on saying, quote, "We didn't want to confront this person. There were 5 of us and one of them. They repeatedly said, 'I'm a patriot. I hate you lefties.' It's pretty clear that they were coming from the far right, not as a normal person supporting independence." Close quote. Now, I read that and I've been graced in many ways with a fine ability to detect political propaganda, to be able to tell the difference between something that sounds like that could happen in reality and something that's absolute nonsense. And straight away, I thought to myself, if they were out indeed taking down saltires and lion rampants, most people wouldn't want to see that. So they'd better have a good excuse why they're taking that down. So I thought to myself, I bet you they came up with that story, that lie. I bet you they fabricated that in order to justify their taking down these flags. Because they go into great depth here. They say it's pretty clear that they were coming from the far right, not as a normal person supporting independence. So they're making it clear that this person who objected to the flags was this far right violent nutter. And thereby they're defending the fact that they've taken down those flags because they were put up with in a very bad spirit, and not by a Scottish patriot, but by this real mean, angry person. So I thought that that's just a lie. That's just a lie, certainly intended to justify them removing saltires and lion rampants, not even Union Jacks, saltires and lion rampants. So I thought to myself, this is my job. I'm going to get to the bottom of this, because if the police were contacted, the police will be able to fill me in on all of this. So we do have this excellent act in the United Kingdom, and it's called the Freedom of Information Request. So I wrote to Police Scotland on the, no, we'll just take that off at the moment. I wrote to Police Scotland with the Freedom of Information Request, and I sent a copy to them of that article, and I took them through it, and I said that this appeared in the National, and that it concerns these people who claim that they were essentially violently approached, and that they contacted you about this. So please, I would request the following information. Were Police Scotland indeed contacted by these people, quote unquote, during the incident, as they claim, or perhaps after the incident? 2, did the police attend the scene of the incident at the time or at a later date? 3, if so, was anyone arrested on the scene or arrested at a later date for such a fray? Because believe me, if you were on the street and you phoned the police, you contacted them during this was happening, and you said there's somebody threatening to attack me with a knife, the police are going to make their way there as soon as possible. They're not going to say, "Oh, just deal with it, mate." They are, thankfully, in Edinburgh anyway. At this stage, they're still going to be there. So the police would be very interested if this was going down. The police are going to be there. And if there's a policeman just happened to be there, he's going to make a note of it, and it's all going to be recorded. So I said, fourthly, what is the status of this incident? Is it going to court? And fifthly, is there a crime reference number for this incident? And if so, may I have it so that I can follow how this all ends up? Because they made a very serious accusation that somebody not only was threatening to attack them with a knife, but also they say broke our equipment. And that was another thing that made me think, it's like, what sort of equipment would they have? They'd have a set of aluminium ladders and a pair of snippers. Well, how do you break that? You would literally need an angle grinder if you wanted to break a set of aluminium ladders. Okay, so all of that, their story just did not add up at all. And so I sent this to the police, and under the Freedom of Information Act, they have to get back within 20 days. And lo and behold, yesterday, we got the response back. Now, let's put up that first one. This is the Freedom of Information response from Police Scotland. Our reference, that's their reference, Freedom of Information 25-3482. Now, it was responded to yesterday. It will go public on the official disclosure site on the 17th or the 18th of November, 7 days after they make the response, it goes live. So people will be able to check this for themselves. And what they've done there is they've gone through my letter. Your recent request for information is replicated below together with our response. Now, let's put up the second bit, which is the bottom of the article. Request for the following information. There are my 5 points, and there is their answer to whether Police Scotland were indeed contacted. Police Scotland tell us, quote, "We have no record of this matter being reported to Police Scotland. The information sought is not held by Police Scotland, and Section 17 of the Act therefore applies." Now, Section 17 of the Act is simply, if they have no information about it, they can just use that as the reason why they're not expanding upon it at all, because they simply don't have any information. That's really all that Section 17 means. You just put that there if it's like, sorry, we have no information on this at all. Okay. So that was a lie. That was nothing but a lie. A spokesperson for Stand Up to Racism told the National that the police had been contacted during the incident. The police get back to us saying, quote, We have no record of this matter being reported. The information sought is not held by us. And so my suspicions were entirely correct. These people just simply made it up, and they made it up in order to justify their removals of saltires and lion rampants. And we have to understand, when we're dealing with those folk, they just lie. And most normal people won't understand that. Most normal people will be like, nobody's going to lie about something like that. You don't understand these folk. They just lie. They just lie, and they'll continue to lie. And I'm sure when that comes out and when this video gets further traction, they'll lie and they'll say, well, we did report it to the police, even though the police have got no knowledge of it. They'll still have some crazy excuse. But of course, if they did in fact report that, and it's been reported in a national newspaper, then you can bet your bottom dollar that the police would be interested, and they would have a record of this, and they would have something to say about it if indeed it did happen. But it didn't happen. It was just propaganda, constant propaganda. And the National should have done its due diligence, and the National should have contacted Police Scotland to find out what the state of that was, but the National didn't. So I've written a letter to the National, which might get in tomorrow's paper or maybe Friday's. I'm hopeful that they'll run it just for the controversy of it. And but basically a slam dunk to A Force for Good. We have exposed the stand up to racism so-called liars. They've been caught in a lie. And as Alan Partridge would say, 1-0 to us. I hope you enjoyed that report. And now, folks, we've got a great guest, Ash, coming up in a minute or so. Folks on TikTok, I'm going to have to say goodbye to you guys. And if you want to watch the interview with Ash, please go to youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. See you around on TikTok. Absolute perception manipulation was what we were faced with there, and what we're faced with as far as those folk are concerned. Folks, please say hello. Please say hello to our man, Ash.
Evening, Alistair, you well?
Very well. Don't know much of that you heard, but basically 1-0 to A Force for Good. As far as the crazy carry on of pretending that they were being attacked, physically attacked, when in fact they just make stuff up. Absolutely ridiculous.
Hardly surprising, though.
Hardly surprising. Well, you've been knocking it out the park, as always, on your YouTube channel. You've got 55,500 followers now, which is great. You put out a lot of stuff. I noticed that one of the stories you put out today was regarding what the Starmer leadership rumors. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, there's big rumors, there's big truth behind it. Yeah, I'm not saying definitely that what's coming out of number 10 now is accurate. I think number 10 are grasping at straws, if you will, and they're trying to frighten anybody off from launching some sort of leadership challenge in the near future. They're trying to defend Starmer. That's their jobs, I suppose, inside number 10, which is fine. But in doing what they've done, Downing Street, which is just an act of great stupidity, they've fired the starting gun, if you will, on their own leadership contests. So, not an outcome they wanted. They wanted to get rid of the leadership contest, but by making this public now, letting everybody know what's going on, they're now they've now started this. We know, for example, that behind the scenes, backbenchers have been holding a lot of meetings, literally sometimes in the next dining room to Starmer, allegedly, talking about how to get rid of him. They're looking for a credible candidate, which is not easy in this bunch of idiots, by the way, in this Labour Party, but they're looking for a credible candidate to take Starmer's place. And now they're briefing against all of them. The Streeting came out this morning, and I don't like Wes Streeting. I think he's absolutely useless. I've met the guy, and I can tell you now, I don't make much of him, but he's always very, very loyal. He always speaks very well of Starmer in public. He never says anything against him or the government. And now all of a sudden he's out there saying number 10 staff need to be sacked and everything. Now he's completely turned on them, although he hasn't turned on Starmer publicly just yet. But now he's obviously very annoyed because he's the one being blamed for all of this. And I don't think he's the one that would take over. I'd be very surprised if they put Streeting in place. Until last night, he was not popular with the backbenchers. They don't like him. They see him as some sort of blur-right figure, which I don't think he is actually. He's far more to the left than that. But they see him as a blur-right, and they don't want him taking over the party because they see him as another carbon copy of Starmer, albeit he's got more of a personality than Starmer. So, but one backbench source said that Starmer has managed to achieve the impossible here. He's made Streeting very popular with the backbenchers now. They're actually willing to compromise and rally around him. But there's also bigger players involved here. We're told that Ed Miliband's involved, Shabana Mahmood's involved, and Angela Rayner. And Angela Rayner is going to be the kingmaker in all of this. Yes, she's disgraced. Yes, she's sat on the backbenches. And for one, she's keeping her mouth shut at the moment. But she's the one that will galvanise the most support from backbench MPs. They will follow her over a cliff. So if she says, I'm backing this candidate, they will then, most of the parliamentary party will follow her, as will the membership. And that will decide who's going to be the next leader. And she'll no doubt manage to get herself a nice cushy job in there as well. A return to the front bench, as it were.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. She's coming back to the front bench one way or another. And who would you imagine are the main candidates that one might be looking at?
Well, incredibly, the most popular people in the Labour Party amongst the membership are Ed Miliband and Angela Rayner, which I find absolutely astonishing, to be quite honest with you. But nevertheless, there it is. I think Shabana Mahmood is the one to watch out for, not because I think she's any good, but because Labour are seriously losing the Muslim bloc vote, and they're desperate to get that Muslim bloc vote. And she's the only person that I can think of who's a prominent Muslim MP in the Labour Party who could possibly get some more Muslims to vote for them. However, I don't think that works because if you look at the polling in her seat, she is on course now to lose her seat to another one of these Gazan independent MPs. So I'm not even sure that she would manage to galvanise the vote. You see these people, they're flip-flopping left, right and centre. 1 minute they're targeting reform because they want to get reform voters on side. They realise then that that's not going to happen because most right-thinking people in this country hate them. Then Starmer wasn't even going to this silly climate change thing in Brazil. All of a sudden, the Greens come along. The boob whisperer, as I call him, Zach Balansky. He has started doing well for some reason in the polls. The Greens have climbed to as high as 18% in some polls. Then he realises, oh no, we're losing the left-wing vote. So he flies off to Brazil for the climate change thing.
Yes. They're stuck losing voters at both ends, as it were. And I think if they gave the job to somebody like Mahmood, while that might appeal very possibly, but maybe not even to the Muslims, they're going to lose more votes than to reform as well. So they're kind of caught in the proverbial rock and a hard place.
The problem is here, sorry to interrupt you, the problem is they came into government after 14 years in opposition. They had no idea what they were going to do. They had no real plans for government, and they've spent their entire time trying to appease voters that don't like them. What's the point in doing that? By default, purely because the Tories were crap and they imploded, you've managed to get yourself a massive majority. So why don't you do something with that majority and try and make people's lives better, and then you might attract more votes next time round. Don't forget, they got less votes than what Corbyn got when Corbyn got slaughtered by Boris. So a bit of contrition, a bit of a bit of, hang on a minute, we're not that popular. Let's try and do something good and get people on side, prove to them that we're worthy of their votes. But they've done none of that. They're spending their entire time trying to focus on people who probably aren't going to vote for them anyway. I'm a Reform UK member now, and I wouldn't vote for Labour in a month of Sundays. I never have, and I never, ever will, because I don't trust them. I just don't see what their strategy is. And now they've managed to almost bankrupt the country. Nothing's going right. Unemployment's hitting highs. People claiming universal credit is hitting brand new highs. Everything's gone so wrong, so badly. There's no coming out of this. And whatever happens in the next few weeks with this leadership stuff, Starmer will be challenged. Whether it's straight after the budget or not, I don't know. I think it's much more likely it's May. I said months ago now that there will be a general election in 2026. And I said this on camera, and everybody laughed. Nobody believed me. And I said, watch out for it. It's coming. And it is coming. I still believe we're going to get that general election next year, because Starmer will not want to hand over his job to anybody else. His ego is far too big. He believes himself to be this wonderful statesman, and he genuinely believes it. It's false, it's rubbish, but he believes it. And he would rather call a general election than allow anybody to dethrone him, if you will.
Do you know, that sounds really quite convincing, and it's not a thought that I had really entertained, but that could very well happen, because next May, of course, we've got the Scottish and the Welsh elections. And I think on the same day, we've also got a whole raft of other more English council by-elections. Sorry, council elections.
Yeah.
And Labour probably will not do very well at those, and it's going to look pretty bad for Starmer. And that is when they could pounce on him, as it were.
Definitely.
And he could, as you say, just stick to his guns rather than facing the indignity of being removed by his own people. He could take it to the country and see what the country thinks.
He's just lost Caerphilly in Wales. That has been Labour for over a century. Even during the days of Thatcher, when Labour were getting absolutely slaughtered, that seat still stayed Labour. It's never voted anything else. And despite the people they wanted for Brexit, they still voted for Corbyn and kept it Labour. Starmer is the first one to lose that seat. In Scotland, Labour are projected to lose all but 2 of their MPs at the next general election, whenever that may come. They're going to get absolutely slaughtered in the Holyrood elections. And in England, it's going to be even worse, I think, than what it is in Scotland. And if he loses control of Wales as well, which it's looking very, very likely now, Reform will take control of Wales, barring some sort of agreement between Plaid Cymru and Labour again to keep Reform out, then he's in even bigger trouble. The polling in Liverpool, Merseyside is probably the most loyal place to Labour in the entire country. They normally poll at about 80%. They're polling at 34% now. Reform UK are polling at 31%. Even Merseyside, if you can lose Merseyside as a Labour leader, you are finished. And he's lost chunks of Merseyside anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what you mentioned, that Reform could take control of Wales. That would certainly be a lot preferable to Plaid Cymru taking control. That's what bothers me, is that they could take control, and with Labour, with a Labour coalition, they would just cut Reform out. I mean, we could be looking at that. Maybe even looking at that in Scotland as well. I mean, that just depends how the votes fall. But I mean, SNP are projected to get the most votes, but they'll get less votes than they got last time. I'm pretty sure of that. But they could still become the main party, and it wouldn't surprise me if they were. But we could have some kind of coalition agreement going on there. Who knows? Yeah. It's going to be very, very interesting, and also quite critical for the future of the United Kingdom, because if SNP won in Scotland and then Plaid won in Wales, and you've got this Sinn Féin head of Northern Ireland First Minister, I mean, that's separatist parties that are running those devolved institutions, not necessarily representing the support, not necessarily representing the majority of people in those countries, but nevertheless still holding those official leadership roles, then that could make things quite difficult. But we'll just have to see how all of that goes. But I do agree that Labour seems to have lost its identity there. Paul says lost decades ago and have no foundation. I think that's true, and that's also just to do with the way that class has shifted in the United Kingdom as well. I mean, in the old days, going back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when we had a sort of industrial base, huge numbers of people were part of the unions. The unions all supported Labour. And then the economic changes, which have not necessarily been for the better, have come about, and that's broken up those sorts of class divisions in such a way that I think ever since then, Labour have struggled to find a role in things, and they, in the absence of the big industrial working class, they went with diversity and let's be the party of all the small groups. Let's be the party for all the Muslims, for all the various sexualities, for all, they broke society down in that sense and tried to be the party for all of those groups. But they're finding that even that doesn't work, because then all these different groups, they all subdivide into their Gazan independents and Corbynistas, and even the Green Party as well, which is a kind of, I think the reason that this Polanski chap is gaining ground is because he appears to have some sort of economic message which appeals to a certain type of Labour voter, even though it may not be the most realistic.
Do you know what Polanski's got, right? I think he's a loon, by the way. Nothing in this world would make me vote for him. But what he's got is a bit of... He's got personality, he's got charisma, and he just says it how it is, basically. What he believes in, I think he's absolute lunacy. However, I think he genuinely believes it, and he actually believes in what he's saying. I've said this about Jeremy Corbyn loads of times. Thank God that man was never Prime Minister of this country. However, at least when he comes out with stuff, he means it. He says what he believes. The problem with Starmer is he believes in nothing but himself. That's the issue here. If he had some, he doesn't understand. He said that himself. He said before, I don't understand politics. I don't understand the game of politics. So, this guy has no political policies, no political philosophy. He doesn't really know what he believes in. I think he just wanted power for the sake of power. And it was given to him on a plate by the Conservatives, and the fact that Reform UK weren't really ready enough to fight an election that was called the snap election that was called by Rishi Sunak. And now he's got power, he's starting to realise, actually, I'm pretty inept. But he's so desperate to hang on for his own ego's sake. Just hang on to, in his mind, I suppose, his legacy. Like, I'm going to go down as this great statesman of a Prime Minister. And, this is quite funny. I know people that were lining the cenotaph on Sunday. And let's just say they're in the forces. I won't say which ones. And as they were there, I spoke to them all afterwards, and they were all like, "Oh God, I wanted to run over and smack him." Honestly, the armed forces absolutely hate this guy.
Yes.
So does most of the country. But Polanski has got something going for him. Corbyn's got something going for him. And that's why they will take a few seats at the general election. Not many, a handful, but they will take a few seats. Whoever said that comment about Labour losing its identity was absolutely right. Not just the reasons you gave were correct as well, of course, but the fact that they just want to be all things to all people. There are still millions of people in this country who call themselves working class and are proud to be so, myself included. Still working class people. All right, we don't have the industry we used to. But Labour now has a front bench where not one of them has ever worked in business. Not one of them, you've got all these Oxbridge types on there. None of them have ever been through a proper job in their entire lives. The only person on that front bench who's ever worked in the private sector, and she's the best they've got, and this is frightening, is Rachel Reeves. And look at the mess that she's made. She's the only person who's ever worked in the private sector. So this is why the number 10 are trying to say the markets will go mad if you get rid of Reeves and Starmer. They might actually, because everyone's so terrified, or business is terrified, about what's coming after them. Because you're going to have something, it's hard to imagine, but something even worse than what we've got now, than these people in there.
Well, I think that we're heading to a situation where there's going to, as far as the economy is concerned, is we're entering uncharted waters, because we're getting to a situation where the debt is going to keep piling up, and the debt interest, which is to say the money that we pay to those from whom we've borrowed the money, is going to become almost unserviceable.
Yeah.
And when that is to say that it would be too much, and we would simply not be able to raise the money for it. And so what we'll then have to do is basically create the money to pay off the debt, create the money out of nothing rather than borrowing it. And then that's going to create panic among the market. And it's a situation that you can resolve, that you can get through it, but it is going to create all sorts of short-term problems. And it is going to require people in the job of running the country who know what they're doing in order to salvage something from that inevitable situation. I think at the end of the day, we can come out of it in a good way, but the short to medium term, it's going to be the markets will be panicking, and the media are going to be telling us that the sky's falling, and people are going to find it genuinely difficult to afford stuff, even harder than it is at the moment. So we're entering a period where we really do need the finest minds on these problems. And, the Labour's not going to cut it. The Green Party's not really going to cut it. Does Reform understand the magnitude of the challenge? Because I don't think it can just be resolved by simply saying, oh, we're going to cut benefits, because at the end of the day, there's only so many benefits that you can cut before people start to suffer. So we're going to need some real unique thinking and people who can steer the ship through those stormy waters. So yeah, as always, we're facing an interesting time, as it were.
75% of the money we're borrowing is actually going on paying the interest on our debt. This is how crazy the country is. We were projected to borrow 70 odd billion pounds in this fiscal year. They've already borrowed 140 billion nearly. We're well over that now.
Yes.
So So of that 104, I think it's 133 billion to be exact. Of that 133 billion, 104 of that has gone on literally paying the interest on our debts. So we're not just borrowing money to pay off the credit card, we're borrowing money to pay off the interest on the credit card we've already got that we can't afford to pay. This is the situation we're in, and nobody, apart from a few people, seem to understand it.
Yeah,
we are in such a bad position. It's unbelievable. And nobody wants to cut spending. Nobody wants to cut the size of the state. The only answer for Labour is to tax. And that's the way these people think, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And the taxes are going to make everybody poorer. By putting up the taxes, you're going to making people poorer as well. And there's only so much money you can make from taxes anyway, before the people with the money just decide to leave or go elsewhere. Anyway, what else has been happening in the world these days? And that's a big issue. Did you notice that the talk TV man, Mike Graham, I don't know if people are aware of this, but he's been fired from his job, and he put up this as a consequence. He's been fired as a consequence of this tweet where he said, "Compare and contrast. Tell me we're not effed by multicultural bollocks Why are we surrounded by non-white people? Just F off. So, okay, that was something that most sober people wouldn't commit to posterity on the internet. But for some reason, that went out under his name and in his Twitter feed. And he consequently claimed that he had been hacked. And we have to emphasize that. So what happened today was that his employers said, okay, then give us your phone and we'll submit it to a forensic analysis company and they'll be able to tell us for sure whether it was hacked or not. And he didn't submit his phone and he never underwent that. So he's been fired. And I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that at all. Do you think they were right to fire him?
Without knowing the full facts, it's difficult, isn't it? So, did Mike Graham share this post? Was he hacked? I don't know for certain. I wouldn't like to speculate. What I will say is it's a controversial post. It's a bit crass. It's a bit blunt. It could easily offend people. I can see how it would offend people. But is it a sackable offence? Not really. So what? He's got an opinion that other people don't like. Get over it. What I will say again, I like Mike Graham a lot. I've watched him every single morning. Talk TV will be finished without him. Audiences are already down 60% since he got suspended. People are boycotting the station. I think he'll come back bigger than ever. He's already announced he's going to do something similar to what we do on YouTube. So I think he'll probably do well with that. But I think it's the end of Talk TV as we know it. They tried to replace him at first with that lady from Loose Women, that Jane Moore, and it was painful to listen to. So now they're on about putting somebody else. So I don't know who yet. Probably Jeremy Kyle or somebody who's equally annoying. So I think I'm not bothered about what Mike said. Do you know what? So what? I've seen people like that Narinder Kaur and other idiots like that saying far worse than what he said, and they don't get sacked for what they do. So what?
That's right. I think not that you or I would tweet out something like that, but if one did, I think you do have to kind of own it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you have to say, yeah, well, I said that. And basically, I had a few glasses of wine, but do you know what? I'm not taking it back. Could I have said it in a better way? Could I have said that illegals should be deported, or there's too many people in the country or whatever, I could have done that, but I'm not taking it back. And because everybody who watches him secretly agrees with that, and so he's off, as you say now, off of Talk TV, and it's not going to be the same. They've only got Julia Hartley Brewer holding that together, I think, and I don't think she's going to be able to hold the entire channel up on her shoulders.
No, so she's the last big name there now. That's
right. That's right. And I think Talk TV, whoever owns Talk TV, should have realized that and said, well, you know what, we're just going to have to keep this guy on, even if we personally don't agree with what he said, for the sake of the actual channel. But it looks like they might be sacrificing the entire channel just because of some serious political incorrectness.
Yeah, why didn't they just say we've disciplined him, we've spoke to him, right? And we've fined him a week's wages, and then we're going to, right, that's it now. We're going to move on, and we'll see how we get on, or something like that. But they've just bowed. They've bowed. I don't know if they're bound by Ofcom or not, but they've bowed to the mob as usual.
Yeah, and there was another story this week, I think. Did you mention it, or I heard about it? Was it a footballer or something like that?
It's from my own.
What was the story behind that?
From my own team. So we have a player called Osmajic that plays for us, a Montenegrin player. He was accused of racially abusing a Burnley player back in February. The FA couldn't find any evidence whatsoever to support the claims. They brought in 4 lip readers to examine the so-called evidence, of which they found none. And now they've decided that he has to be banned for 9 games on I quote, the balance of possibilities. So it's possible that he could have said something. In other words, that's the reasoning now. You can actually be found guilty when there's no evidence against you.
Right. So this player was banned presumably because the other player claimed that he was being racially abused.
Yeah.
But they couldn't tell from the footage of the person on the film on the park. They couldn't tell what he was saying.
Yeah, there was no
even though
evidence
they tried
whatsoever.
to lip read him. Yeah, they couldn't tell what it was.
No.
But nevertheless, they've just banned him for nine games as well. I mean, that's almost like a large part of the season.
Yeah, it's a big ban, and it's just ridiculous. They wanted him to be guilty. If any investigation is taking about 180 days, roughly, then clearly the evidence is going to be sketchy at best, or you have no evidence whatsoever. And that's what's happened here. And because Preston haven't got the right to appeal the decision for some reason, they've just thought, oh, well, we'll ban him anyway, because we don't want to be accused of, I don't know, sympathising with a racist or something like that. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that's irritating as well. And it's to try to also make an example of somebody as well. You know, look at us, we're so prim and proper, and we're making an example of this player. That's really irritating. Really irritating.
You used to be innocent until proven guilty in this country. What's happened to that?
Yeah. Well, that's a distant memory as far as those sorts of things. So quite a good few comments here. Generally agreeing with you. Groucho says, never apologize for speaking the truth. Metallurgy says Mike's content was good sometimes.
I love him, mate. I'm not saying I agree with him on everything that he says, but who do you agree with everything 100% on all the time? I'm.
No, you don't want to do that. So they might go woke and go broke, as Zoe says here. That's very much a possibility.
Well, their audiences aren't big anyway. Their audiences are pretty damn small. Talk TV. Mike Graham brought in a lot. Like I said, since he's been off air, they're down 60%. They can't sustain it.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What will you say as your parting comments? What will you say to Megs here? I do hope Britain can be saved. I'm in Australia, but my family has relatives over there. Can we be saved? Ash, give us the good news.
Yeah, Britain can be saved. Of course it can. But it takes now the indigenous people of this country to stand up, as people are doing actually, in ever increasing numbers. And it's about time we started, first of all, voting the establishment out that we can. That means getting rid of Labour and Tories. Let's try and have something fresh at least. Maybe everyone doesn't agree with me. I believe that to be Reform UK, or at least it's worth giving them a go. If they fail, what have we lost? It's better than keep voting in Labour and Tory. We're seeing protests all over the country, peaceful protests for the most part. Pressure being brought to bear by people like Rupert Law. I saw somebody mention Ben Habib in the comments, somebody else who's got a lot to contribute, I think, as well. And I think the tide is turning a lot. The age of this woke generation, this woke, whatever it was, fad, that's all going now. Slowly but surely, the world is getting back to normal again. And we just need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, just get back to normal. Let's try and ride it out, unfortunately, until the general election, until these idiots are out of power. And then we can at least try and do something different. But yes, of course, we can be saved. But now is not the time to run away from that fight either, I'm afraid. Now is the time to double down and push harder, because otherwise we will find ourselves in major trouble within the next 15, 20 years. If we're ever outnumbered, say, in our own country or something like that, you could really find yourself in a lot of trouble.
Oh, absolutely, and I agree, and I say to younger people as well. If you're interested in politics, get into it, and set the agenda for these parties, because there's going to have to be radical people running the country, because we're going to be facing radical times that are going to require people who are not afraid. And I do see good signs on the horizon as well. And one has got to always maintain hope and work for the good of the country, our fantastic country. Absolutely. Well, I can't believe it's actually 8:05 already. So I've been talking for half an hour. I don't know where that went.
Flies, doesn't it? When you get going.
Absolutely. And a good number of people, I see you've been streaming to your site as well, and a good number of people have come in watching it on your channel as well, which is youtube.com/@ Preston Journalist.
Yep.
There you go, youtube.com/@ Preston Journalist. Well, fantastic. Well, you're always great entertainment and great font of current affairs. Thanks very much for being on the show, and love to have you on again, as we will, and no doubt in the not too distant future. But for now, Ash, unless you've any parting words.
No, fine. I think I've got everything off my chest. Okay, I can sleep easy now.
Good. Good. Absolutely. Okay then.
Yeah.
See you later.
Thanks, Alistair. Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Good night. Fantastic. Ash, that Preston Journalist. Well, folks, tonight our big story was, of course, we revealed this lie. The notion that somebody who tried to threaten the stand up to so-called racism campaigners. We did a Freedom of Information request to Police Scotland, and Police Scotland had no information about this and had no report on it, even though these people say that they contacted the police. And so 1-0 to us. Now, let's look at one or two of your comments here. Stephen, you can get sacked for imaginary offences. Yep, that's what that person who played for Preston was subject to, an imaginary offence. Paul says, reading your books at the moment, Alistair. Well, our books in question are our big book for the Union, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Please do search Amazon for those titles, and also that QR code up there, if you want to hold your QR code reader, or rather your mobile phone up to that, it will take you directly to the page on Amazon that sells this book. And we've sent this book to quite a few opinion formers and politicians, and the answer to what needs to happen as far as immigration and small boats is concerned is all contained in there. And that information can be yours for $12.99. Can't beat that. Catherine says, brilliant show, guys. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you, ma'am. Lots of comments tonight. I think that's because we were also getting streamed on Ash's channel at the same time due to the wonders of modern technology. Long fight ahead and won't be easy, says Metallurgy. Thanks to all our supporters for joining us. What does this button do? Says, are you going to ignore me? I'm trying to find out something that I can read out that you're saying. What does this button do? Here's one. It's mighty strange that it's Tories that were the ones deemed needing to be replaced first, when it's always Labour causing all our problems and Rwanda was actually working. You're not a Labour fan, I can see. Sean Connery kept the SNP warm for Labour to fill with all its rejects. Okay, folks, we're going to be back next week. In the meantime, it just remains for me to say that we will see you next week. We've got another guest next week for another fantastic programme. And hopefully we'll be able to report on the National having run our letter about how they got that report all wrong. And that'll be for next week. But in the meantime, let me just say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.